The timid and delicate first beauty in the capital unfortunately fell into the hands of human traffickers. Everyone in the capital shook their heads and sighed, this wave is coming to an end. 1,000 miles away, the useless beauty opened her eyes and sold the human trafficker with her backhand. The girl who had changed her heart squandered the money obtained from human traffickers and returned to the capital, only to realize that her former little brother had become a big shot now, and each one of them raised her as their daughter, 1, 2, 3, 4 so, now she actually has 4 male mothers. This article is also known as, After the Rebirth of the Tragic Female Lead of Chang'an, and, I Will Go Up, All the Priests Will Be Equal, keywords of the novel. Chang'an How Will Pop-Up Window, Chang'an Hayat's Complete Collection Download, Chang'an Hausen Latest Chapter Reading. Chapter 1. Soul Returns to Homeland. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 1. Soul returns to Homeland. In early spring in February, the permafrost begins to thaw, and tender buds will sprout. The spring cold is still severe. Wow! Pour down a basin of cold water. The piercing coldness, like an invisible hand, suddenly pulled back the hazy thought that was about to fall into eternal silence. It seems like I'm really out of breath. What a bad luck. The usual amount of medicine is like this, how could we end up dying with her? The deposit of 60 taels of silver has been collected, where can we find another one to deliver tonight? Pop. A piercing pain came from her cheeks, and she was thrown into the corner of the wall. The girl, whose eyes were tightly closed, frowned slightly as her whole body was soaked. Okay, this little slut is really pretending to be dead. The disheveled bun was grabbed by someone, and the girl instinctively opened her eyes, filled with the fierce face of a middle-aged man covered in sunburn. Get up before you die. The pain of her hair being pulled and the obviously unfavorable situation in front of her made the girl have no time to think about anything else. Her body instinctively overthrew her thoughts, and she instinctively used the force when she stood up to grab the man's forearm. As she forcefully folded it back, her right leg kicked heavily under the man's body. Be agile in your movements. But the strength is far from enough. The only advantage is that the man is unprepared and never expected her to counterattack, and her movements are so fast, taking advantage of the short gap from the man's grip. The girl who noticed something was wrong with her body quickly scanned around, took a step back, lightly kicked with her left foot, and a dagger flew up from a pile of burlap bags beside her. She firmly grasped it in her hand and held it horizontally in front of her. You son of a bitch, you've eaten the bear's heart and leopard's gallbladder. The man was filled with shock and anger. This little girl is clearly timid and cowardly. She only cried and begged him to spare her all the way and let her go home. If he took out a dagger, she would be even more frightened and wouldn't say anything. It's such a little useless person who dares to turn around and hold a dagger at him at this moment. The woman behind the man was also startled and very angry at the girl's disobedience. She cursed and walked up to the man to see the girl's true appearance. People are brought back by men, and when taken out of a burlap bag, they appear to be in a state of unconsciousness. Although it can be seen that they have indeed had a good skin, they are still lifeless. At this moment it was evident that the wet young girl's green hair was half scattered, and under the continuous turbulence, turmoil, and fright, her face was devoid of any blood, but her beauty became even more extraordinary. Especially those eyebrows and eyes, clear and cold, with dark and deep pupils, like what kind of mysterious thing is hidden beneath the surface of a lake in winter, making people dare not look directly at it. At this moment, the woman had only one feeling. This face. 100 taels of silver were missing. I immediately felt extremely fortunate again. Fortunately I didn't die. Otherwise, these 100 taels will really go to waste. Seeing the young girl's hand trembling as she held the dagger, the fearless woman sneered and said, anyone who comes here and doesn't know what to do will have no good end. Little lady, I advise you not to suffer for it yourself. The woman's voice was sharp and threatening, making a particularly noisy sound in the girl's ear. The next moment, a wooden stool flew out at the girl's feet and hit the knee of the woman walking towards her. The woman let out a painful cry, her knees softened, and she fell to the ground. This little slut. The man was extremely angry and didn't care much, swinging his wooden stick at hand. However, the girl had already taken a faster step towards him, pouncing like a little wolf, exerting all her strength to knock him down to the ground, and knelt down on his neck with one leg. No matter how strong the man was, he was suppressed and couldn't stand up for a moment. Subconsciously, as he was about to reach out and pull the girl away, his palm was suddenly pierced by the dagger in the girl's hand and nailed to the ground. The woman reacted and got up. Just as she was about to step forward, the girl quickly pulled out a bloody dagger. The dagger flew like an arrow, as if it had given birth to eyes, and it hit her eye socket. Ah! The woman screamed and screamed in pain as she covered her bleeding eyes and fell to the ground. The man, whose neck had been suppressed for too long, suffocated and passed out with his eyes turning white. The girl, who had almost exhausted all her strength, finally let go of the man. She leaned aside and sat on the ground, casually picking up the cloth bag that had fallen from the man's side, while looking up at the door. Outside the relatively small hall door, there stood a stunned boy. "Is this your dad?" The girl spoke, her voice weak and clear, but her tone was straight and without any fluctuations. The 11 or 12-year-old boy glanced at the man beside her who had fainted, shook his head eagerly, and the shock and fear in his eyes were about to overflow. "You trash, hurry up and tie her up. Hurry up and invite the doctor for us. Hurry up and invite the doctor," said the woman with bleeding eyes on the side in a sharp voice. The boy's expression swayed and panicked. The girl looked at him and said, "Do you want to fight me?" The girl's words made the boy make a decision, his expression no longer wavering, and he shook his head faster. "Is there anyone else?" The girl walked over him and looked at the small courtyard filled with coffins. Although it was daylight, the gate of the courtyard was tightly bolted from inside. The boy shook his head again. "I tied you up, or you tied them up." The girl was straightforward and gave him two choices. Seeing her standing up, the boy didn't dare to delay. He quickly approached and took the hemp rope, tying the unconscious man first. "You heartless thing! See if I don't kill you." The woman cursed angrily, holding her eyes trembling with pain in one hand and grabbing the wooden stick next to her with the other. The boy's expression instinctively shrank. "Tell her to shut up." The girl threw the cloth bag in her hand. The boy clearly knew what was inside and boldly stepped forward, immediately throwing it at the woman. The woman's eyes were bloodshot, and in a state of panic, she was completely unprepared. After taking a few breaths of sleeping pills, she was powerless to fall to the ground. After tying up the woman, the boy kindly and vigorously dragged the two of them to a safe corner of the wall. After finishing all of this, he quietly raised his eyes and found the girls back in front of the coffee table. "She is eating roasted chicken." The boy looked at the bones of the half-roasted chicken that she had quickly disposed of with some surprise. The girl casually picked up a nearby cotton towel and wiped her hands. She didn't feel hungry. But at this moment, she was too weak, and her instincts made her choose to eat in order to recover her strength. She turned around, looked around the room, and then walked out of the hall with her foot raised. There were several freshly made coffins in the courtyard, and she picked one that was pleasing to the eye. She stepped on the nearby bench and entered the coffin, lying down. "Well, it's very suitable for her size." The girl closed her eyes with satisfaction. Unexpectedly, once a person dies, there are still many troubles after death. In the end, the coffin had to be put in by herself, without even a decent ghost. Everything depended on self-awareness, and it was fortunate that she had always had strong self-management skills. But the regulations of the underworld were somewhat perfunctory. The boy who witnessed the bizarre process of her lying down in the coffin said, The immense exhaustion quickly overwhelmed the young girl in the coffin, causing her to fall into a deep sleep. When I opened my eyes again, the sky was filled with sunset, and it was already dusk. The girl in the coffin slowly sat up, looking at everything in front of her and couldn't help but fall into contemplation. After sleeping for a while, with the recovery of physical strength, the consciousness in various parts of the body became clear, and the mind gradually became clear. This is not an illusion after death. But she is clearly dead, the kind that cannot be further revealed. She instinctively raised her hand and leaned towards her neck, where there was no wound. How could that be so? The sound is not my own. She stretched out her hands in the twilight to scrutinize. Although these hands have scars, they are too delicate and weak, and they are not hers. The girl slowly stood up and stood inside the coffin in the twilight, gazing at everything real around her. An old tree in the corner bloomed a few scattered peach blossoms. It's spring day. And she died in a heavy snowfall in December. When she died, she looked in the direction of her homeland. And now, she seems to have really come back. The girl withdrew her gaze and looked back at the unfamiliar hands. So. Is she using a corpse to revive her soul? Without waiting for the girl to think about anything else, the light footsteps from behind made her turn her head cautiously. Previously, I only treated everything in front of me as an unrealistic illusion after death, relying solely on instinct to respond without delving deeper, but now it's different, it's still that boy. He stood timidly under the stone steps at this moment, looking at her with a strange gaze that almost looked at things that did not belong to this world. Although the fact was indeed so. Do you recognize me? The girl asked. The boy shook his head if he didn't want to. Without an answer, the girl left the coffin and jumped off the bench. Seeing her turn and walk towards the courtyard door, the boy struggled and hesitated for a moment, then quickly chased after her and reached out to stop her, shaking his head with a restrained expression in his eyes. No, you can't leave, he said urgently. So you're not mute? No, it's not. The boy's expression was complex and anxious. You can't leave. The girl remained expressionless and said, I don't like hitting children. No. The boy pointed to the tightly closed wooden door and lowered his voice, his big eyes full of anxiety. It's all outside. All of it. The girl looked at him and said, what? Pinch your fingers and calculate, today is suitable for opening a new book, it happens to be your birthday. Write back my favorite long story of rebirth. Overall, it's a bit relaxed. Let's embark on a journey of ha together once again in the new book period. I hope everyone can leave more messages. If there are tickets, it would be even better. 3. I love you. End of this chapter. Chapter 2. New arrival. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 2. New arrival. The boy's demeanor made her feel like she had been reborn in a world of ghosts and monsters. As long as she pushed open this door, there were countless ghosts and monsters waiting for her. But the boy said, it's all. The ones who shoot flowers, the whole Changjia village, it's all. They are all a group, covering up for each other. If they escape, they will definitely be caught. The boy had a long-standing fear in his eyes. No one has been able to leave here these years, they can't escape. The girl heard this and looked at the tightly closed door. It doesn't seem like it's a ghost world. But it is even more absurd and terrifying than the world of ghosts and monsters. A cold wind blew, and the girl's mind became somewhat clear, giving her a clearer understanding of the situation before her. She looked at the boy and said, you were also abducted. As the dusk deepened, the boy nodded, his round eyes resembling those of a small dog trapped in a cage, pitiful and harmless. Then you dare to follow me and tie them up? The boy whispered, I can't beat you. The girl looked at the half-grown boy in front of her, who was only half a head shorter than herself and obviously used to doing rough work on a daily basis. She is now too weak, and just now she managed to control those two people with a clever and fierce force. This child can't beat her, it's a fear of not daring to try to resist. This is a disease that needs to be treated. The girl turned around and returned to the hall. The boy quickly caught up with her. The couple, who had their hands and feet bound, had already woken up. The woman with a face covered in blood was probably not relieved of the medicine and could only faint in moans. The man was trying to break free from the rope, but to no avail. The tying method of this rope was taught to the boy by him, and he used it to help him in his daily life, but now it is being used on him. Eating dog food inside and outside. Don't untie me yet. As soon as he saw the boy come in, the man couldn't help but look fierce. I've raised you for so many years in vain, a useless person who doesn't distinguish between inside and outside. This time, let's see that I won't break your legs. The boy's eyes showed a look of fear, and he thought of the pain and despair when his fists, feet, and sticks landed on him, and his face immediately turned white. The next moment, the long stick that was commonly used on him appeared in front of him. The boy instinctively took a step back. Break his leg. The girl's tone had no room for turning. Now. The boy looked at her incredulously. Otherwise, it would be your leg that broke. The girl held a stick and handed it to him, while the other hand held a recently picked up bloody dagger. Her long hair was half scattered like a waterfall, her skin was extremely white and her pupils were pitch black, like a white jade statue with no expression, emotions, or fear. The threatening words were spoken out of her mouth, leaving no room for doubt in life. The boy's lips trembled slightly as he took the long stick. How dare you? The man was extremely angry, his long-standing dignity being trampled upon and challenged. He struggled hard until his face and neck turned red, and his fierce eyes stared at the boy. Strike. The girl's voice was calm, but it was like a deadly spell. The boy took 2 steps forward, gritted his teeth, closed his eyes, and waved his stick towards the man. This stick hit the man on the shoulder, causing him to curse loudly in pain. It's crooked, the girl reminded beside her. The boy boldly opened his eyes slightly and aimed them at the man's leg before hitting him again. Try again. One stick after another, the man's curse gradually weakened, leaving only a painful scream. Stop beating, stop beating. The woman next to her cried weakly, this is your father. Nurturing kindness is even more important than giving birth. How could you bend your elbow out? You are already a beggar without a father or mother. We brought you back with kindness, raised you like a biological son, and still expect you to take care of your old age and send you to the end. To our surprise, you are a white-eyed wolf who is not familiar with raising. The boy pursed his lips as if he didn't know what to say. The girl roughly understood. This is because he committed too many sins and couldn't give birth to a son, so he left the abducted child to be raised by his side. Don't worry, isn't this about to send you off? The girl crouched down beside the 2 of them. What are you doing? The woman trembled as she looked at the dagger stuck to her face. I ask, you answer. The girl looked at her and said, where did you kidnap me to this place? The woman couldn't understand why she asked such strange questions on the surface, but the dagger was right at the corner of the other intact eye, so she immediately replied, Beijing. Beijing. Under whose command? Command. What's the point of directing this kind of thing? The cold tip of the knife pressed against the corner of her eye, and the woman's tongue trembled as she said. No one instructed me, Chang'an festival. I only targeted the little lady around me. No. I saved you. The man who had broken one leg lost his momentum just now and hurriedly said, on the night of the Lantern Festival, you fell into the river with no one around. You were about to drown, but I saved you. As a gesture of gratitude, the dagger in the girl's hand turned to him and said, do you know how I fell into the water? Although this body was not hers at first, it has taken over and many things are still well understood in order to prevent future troubles. For the first time arriving, one needs to know oneself and the other, and understand the situation. How did I know? I just happened to pick it up. I happened to save you. The man had a hint of doubt in his heart. She didn't know how it fell into the water herself. Thinking of the other person's sudden change in behavior and courage, the useless beauty on the same road who could only cry and tremble looked completely different. The man couldn't help but feel that the face in front of him, which could have made him a big prophet, showed an indescribable strangeness. A chill inexplicably rose from the man's back. The voice that made him shiver in his heart asked, "Then ask something you know. Besides me and him, how many people have you abducted and harmed over the years?" The man and the woman exchanged a glance at each other upon hearing the words, both stumbling for a moment. Who could count and remember such things one by one? The girl's eyes became even colder and she said to the boy, "Take some paper and pen. Although this place is not a place of study, it appears to be a white funeral business on the surface. In the hall, there are also cargo boxes filled with small items. Men usually dress up as peddlers, walking around and secretly committing acts of abduction." Therefore, there was no shortage of paper and pen, and the boy quickly picked them up. The girl looked at the two of them and said, "Where, when, who was abducted, whether it was life or death, and where it was sold, just say as much as you can remember." The woman stared at her and said, You want to sue the government?" The girl didn't answer and only said, "Also, those who have been involved in this activity in the village have also been mentioned." A hint of almost imperceptible disdain flashed in the woman's eyes, and as she was about to speak, she was lightly poked from behind by the man. Both of them had their hands tied behind their backs, and at this moment they were squeezed together, thinking that no one was aware of this subtle movement. The woman understood and, under the pressure of the dagger, spoke in detail. As she said, the girl finished writing 2 full pages before throwing away her pen. As she threw the pen away, she raised her dagger and made a cut on the man's arm. The blade penetrated deeply into the flesh, injuring her muscles and veins, and she was immediately bleeding profusely. The man screamed in agony. "I've said everything I need to say, why are you still hurting someone? Press their hands and draw blood on the paper." The girl stood up. Every boy should step forward and follow suit. The girl stood in front of the two, lowered her eyes, and finally asked, "Where do you plan to send me tonight?" The woman was afraid that the dagger in her hand would fall on her, and because she had a calculation in her heart, she didn't want to suffer any more flesh and blood. So she said truthfully, "In Lyoka Lane in the city, in the home of an outsider." "What is this person's surname and who is it?" "I really don't know. I haven't even seen my true face before," the woman said bitterly. "I only know that she is a generous employee. Over the years, we have only received beautiful young ladies in our village, and he often gave them portraits to choose from first. He was interested, so he gave him a deposit in silver first. What he doesn't like, let's sell it elsewhere. But these are all his servants who have negotiated with him. That place is just a few courtyards, and we have never dared to inquire about his identity and surname." The girl bent down and picked up a note at the woman's foot, opened it and asked, "Is this the deposit voucher?" The woman quickly answered yes. The receipt was very simple, without leaving the names of both parties. Firstly, such activities did not need to be regulated, and secondly, it was evident that the other party was not worried that these human traffickers would take a deposit and run away. Another move would cost 100 taels, indicating that the identity of this outsider must be unusual. The girl pondered and put away the note. Then he looked at the woman and said, "Where's the deposit of 60 taels?" The woman was stunned for a moment. How could she want both life and money? "Bring it." The girl didn't have much patience in her eyes. The woman could only endure heartache and say, "In the box under the bed inside. When they get away, she won't spare this damn little bitch. Not to mention whether or not you can get to Changjia village, does this little slut really think that after successfully reporting to the government, you can leave safely? Alright, let's get dizzy." The girl turned around and walked towards the inside, explaining, "It's okay to take multiple doses of medicine. It's okay if the medicine dies. The owner of her body probably died under the heavy elixir. The couple's voices of protest quickly weakened. The girl pulled the box out of the bed and saw that in addition to some silver bills and broken silver jewelry, there were also road signs, drugged cotton pads, and other items used for transporting goods to and from various cities. She picked and chose, and the boy walked in and whispered, "What should we do next?" "Find a men's robe that I can wear, and also bring your belongings." The boy didn't ask much, so he ran out. At the moment of turning back, I had an extra set of clothes and a kitchen knife in my hand. The girl took the robe and looked at the kitchen knife in his hand, saying, "Are you taking this?" The boy nodded and said, "I only know how to cook, I only need this." Looking at the kitchen knife prepared for cooking, the girl paused for a moment. This child, who has clearly never been out of the house and doesn't know how to plan his travels, is so unappealing to worldly pleasures, yet so full of worldly pleasures. So, she couldn't help but ask, "Have you brought all the silver with you?" "I have it." The boy took out something from his arms and asked, "Is it enough?" Looking at the copper plate, the girl said, "If it's not used at all, it should be enough." The boy exclaimed, "Well, then I'll find some more." He ran out again, and when he returned, the girl had already walked out of the room, changed into the man's robe, tied up her black hair, and used something to smooth her eyebrows. Her skin color had also darkened a lot. The boy was stunned, puzzled by how she managed to do it in a short period of time, and walked like a young gentleman. The boy regained his senses and followed up, "So. Are you going to the government office now?" "No." The girl picked up 2 burlap bags and said, "Put them inside. Today marks the beginning of winter, and it has cooled down in the early morning. Everyone should pay attention to keeping warm in the morning and evening. Wishing everyone a pleasant reading experience." End of this chapter. Did Chapter 3 run away? You are listening at novelfull.audio. Did Chapter 3 run away? On a spring night, the moon is cold and silent. In Changjia village, the sound of donkey carts driving startled a burst of dog barks. The villagers here are different from others. Even in the middle of the night, some people quickly light up the lights to check if there is any movement, which is a strange vigilance. The girl hidden in a pile of funeral paper inside the donkey cart looked at the 4 or 5 lights that lit up one after another and whispered, "Just drive the cart, don't look around." "That's Lao Chuan's car, isn't it? Why did he go out late at night?" "You don't know yet. Lao Chuan made a big deal this time. He said it was a rare and good product. Tisk, Lao Chuan's fortune has been really good in recent years. Just missing a son. Didn't they have one in their family? I'll find a mother-in-law to come back in 2 years, and having a grandson will be my own." A few men huddled their necks and grabbed their sleeves, joking and shouting in the direction of the donkey cart ahead, "Old Chuan. Why go out to deliver in the middle of the night? Yeah, be careful of encountering ghosts halfway. Old Chuan, should we go together?" In the darkness, the driver's figure stiffened and his voice trembled like a mosquito. "What? What should we do?" The voice behind the car said, "Let's go, hurry." The boy, wearing an old lambskin hat of a middle-aged man and wrapped in a thick cotton coat to conceal his figure in the night, was about to burst out with a heart, daring to stare straight ahead and drive the donkey cart faster. "What's wrong with Lao Chuan? Why not speak up?" A few people exchanged a glance and their faces suddenly changed. "Hurry up, go take a look at his house. Lao Lu, come with me and chase after me." Soon, the village heard the sound of gongs that could only be heard when water was flowing nearby. They are not well-trained military attendants, but the 4 words, "damage at all costs," are engraved in their bones, and their level of vigilance far exceeds that of ordinary people. People often have strong spontaneity in the face of benefits, especially those obtained without labor due to improper sources, and do not need to learn or teach. Hurry up. Catch up with them. Except for the 2 people who started running to chase, soon someone rode a mule and chased over. Listening to the sound getting closer behind him and thinking about the terrible consequences of being caught back, the boy's forehead and palms were covered in sweat, and his mind was filled with only one sound. Sure enough, it was impossible to escape. The next moment, he suddenly felt a wind coming from behind. The girl hiding among the funeral objects suddenly stood up, jumped up, and sat on the wooden board beside the boy. With one hand, she grabbed the donkey leash from the boy's hand, and with the other hand, as she raised her whip, she said, "Sit still. If I fall, I won't turn back to save you." The donkey cart suddenly accelerated and charged forward. The boy tightly grasped the carriage, and for a moment, he could only see the girl's tied and half-wrapped ponytail flying, and the yellow and white paper money on her shoulder being blown off. As the donkey cart ahead grew faster and faster, the people chasing after them on mules became increasingly irritable. "Is this damn a donkey cart? Running so fast, don't even talk about him, do donkeys dare to believe it themselves?" Under the huge speed difference, the driver ahead picked a fork in the road that confused his vision. After chasing for half an hour, he finally completely lost the driver. The sound in Changjia village was chaotic, and most of the villagers had already woken up and rushed towards Li Zhang's home. Old Xuan's house is full of blood. A half-dead little lady. How could it be? Why hasn't the third child come back yet? Can't we really let her run away? I don't believe in evil anymore. No one has ever been able to run out of here alive. Li Zhang, what do you think should be done? What's so urgent? We can leave Changjia village or Hezhou. The man sitting in a chair in a cloak looked impatient. Although I can't say anything big, such a commotion is quite troublesome. I'll go to the city at dawn to take care of it. Each family will pay 10 taels of silver first, and I'll ask old Chuan to make up for it later. Although there were some unwilling ones among the crowd, they could only follow after complaining a few words. The lame woman who lowered her head to pour water on the side listened to these words and pursed her dry and cracked lips. Did you really escape? The boy sat on the donkey cart, sweating profusely and looking back in a daze towards the direction of Changjia village, which was no longer visible. Did we really escape? The boy asked cautiously as he looked at the girl's unreal profile. He dared not dream like this for a long time. I dreamed about it when I was young, and when I woke up, my whole body was covered in injuries. He would always wipe away tears in the dark for a long time. But the girl who looked ahead said, "Not yet." The boy was stunned. The girl glanced at the official road ahead, judged the direction, and headed east. As the sky was about to break, the donkey cart slowly stopped in front of the city gate. The girl looked up at the two characters of Hezhou above the city wall. At first, she heard the couple speak with a Hezhou accent. She has been familiar with the map of Dashing since childhood, and she has also been to Hezhou before, so she judged the official way to enter the city based on her memory. So, this world is indeed the same as before, everything is the same as before, but she has resurrected from death, in another body. After 5 shifts, the city gate slowly opened. The city gate guard yawned and began a day of inspection. Many people have already lined up outside the city gate, and at this time, most of the people entering the city are small vendors rushing to the morning market. 2 young people, one big and one small, dressed in ordinary clothes and carrying funeral items on donkey carts, are also not prominent in the crowd. The guard waved their hands to release the vehicle without checking its contents. As the 2 guards chatted and chatted about leisure time, the girl lowered her eyes. Although it is not necessary to be too strict in dealing with the entry and exit of the people under the jurisdiction of Hezhou during non-wartime or critical times, the scattered state of these guards shows that the governance of Hezhou is too lax and unregulated. So, no wonder. After entering the city, the sky was already clear. Go buy 10 buns. The girl took out a broken silver and handed it to the boy. I only eat meat buns. The boy looked at the steamed bun stall she was pointing at and cautiously approached, handing over the broken silver with both hands. He said extremely seriously, 10 meat buns. Here. He held the steamed bun back in front of the girl, with an inexplicable expression in his eyes, as if he had accomplished an extremely distant and remarkable task. The girl took the kettle from the donkey cart, poured it clean, and picked up a bun to bite. Baozi is hot and steaming, and eating it can make people clearly know that they are still alive. Only the living can eat. Living is really good. The girl who ate 5 steamed buns in one breath looked at the boy standing there motionless, thought for a moment, picked up a steamed bun, and told him, "This is steamed bun, something you can eat." The boy was stunned. He didn't know it was Baozi. Can I also eat together?" he asked uncertain. Facing her always cautious eyes, the girl nodded and handed him the bun. The girl's fingertips were slender and fair, even more delicate than the soft buns in her hands, shining softly in the morning light. The boy looked at her for a long time before reaching out to take it. During the break from eating steamed buns, the girl's fellow traveler inquired about the location of Lyoka Lane. "Do you remember what to say?" The boy nervously pressed down and nodded, "Remember. In Lyoka Lane, there are only 3 households in total. And the only place on the plaque outside the gate that does not have a surname, only the 4 characters, Quiet Wind Farewell Courtyard." The boy led the donkey cart to the back door of the other courtyard, nervously swallowed his saliva, and gathered the courage to come forward and knock on the door. "Thank you all for your support. It's great to see everyone familiar with you. The data for the new book period is quite important. Could you please follow up and interact with me? Try not to save any text, otherwise I will cry." End of this chapter. Chapter 4. Scrawled Gifts. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 4. Scrawled Gifts. And it was at this moment that the door was suddenly pushed open from inside. The boy was startled and took 2 steps back. Where did it come from? What did it do? The first middle-aged man dressed up as a steward saw the boy and frowned as he looked at him. "My dad asked me to come over," the boy said timidly. "Which is your dad?" "Zhou. Tuesday Suppository." The steward's eyes narrowed, and he felt that the boy was a bit familiar with his eyes. "From Changjia village." The boy quickly nodded and stepped forward to hand over the deposit receipt. "How did you do it this time?" The steward took the note and scolded with a calm face, "We agreed to deliver the things last night, but my staff waited all night. In the middle of the night, I finally managed to find another one on the spot, but it didn't work at all." The master's mind was full of the portrait sent by Changjia village earlier. This guy is still throwing things and getting angry. He was scolded and was about to take someone to Changjia village to handle this matter. The steward spoke and looked at the donkey cart behind the boy. "You. Calm down," the boy said with great fear. "My dad injured his leg yesterday and couldn't move, which delayed him. Last night, I came on behalf of my dad, but I took the wrong path and by the time I arrived, the city gate was already closed." "All right." The steward didn't have the patience to listen to his nonsense. "Just say, have you brought the goods?" It's in the car." The steward waved to several servants behind him. A large black cloth bag was hidden at the bottom of the burial object, and several servants worked together to move it down. The things inside struggled and moved faintly. The steward noticed something was wrong and said, "Why is it so heavy?" The boy lowered his head and whispered, "Dad said, besides the one on the portrait, he also got a good one and asked me to deliver it together. It's just because Dad didn't come personally this time, and the job wasn't done beautifully enough. It's all just a compensation for the staff." Upon hearing this, the steward did not doubt that he had it, and his face slightly softened. He reached out and didn't hit the smiling face person. The other person was so capable of doing things, and future transactions with Changjia village were also inevitable. He had no reason to be too harsh, so he took out a money bag and threw it at the boy, saying, "Come back late next time, I won't be so talkative." "Yes, thank you very much, thank you very much." The boy quickly bowed. "Wait a moment. As the servants passed by, the steward wanted to open the cloth bag and inspect it. The boy's heart suddenly lifted. However, the knot used to tie the black cloth bag was tied very firmly. As the steward was struggling to untie it, he only heard the boys shout from the alley. "Come over here, that cat is coming here." Young people chase cats and dogs in the morning, and they are the most noisy. The steward heard this sound and did not want to be seen causing trouble, so he urged the servants, "Carry it in first. It's not the first time they've been bought and sold, and those in Changjia village have always had a clear idea in their hearts. They never dare to use their cleverness outside of their family members, otherwise they will suffer." Seeing the group of people returning to the courtyard and closing the door, the boy dared not delay for a moment and quickly drove away. As the donkey cart passed through the alley, it stopped. The girl who had just made a sound and diverted the attention of those people nodded and said, "Well done. Here." The boy handed her the money bag either because he received praise or because he was too nervous and excited, with bright eyes. The girl took the money bag with one hand and touched the head of the green donkey with the other, with approval in her eyes. On the other side, the steward of the other courtyard led his servants to just carry the cloth bag into the inner courtyard and walked out in front of a man in brocade who was around 30 years old. The man with blue eyes and big ears was so fat that he angrily kicked the steward and said, "I didn't want you to go to Changjia village. What are you delaying here? Where did you find inferior goods to top up? Throw them out as soon as possible." The steward covered his stomach and exclaimed, "Alas." Ignoring the pain, he quickly pulled his smiling face and bowed, saying, "Don't be angry, Lang. This is exactly the one from the picture that Zhou Jiatsuan just sent. When his husband was young, he had some unusual quirks and didn't really like the girls in the flower tower. Only the innocent woman from the good family, who received the portrait sent by the Zhou family from a few days ago, couldn't even move her eyes and her soul was hooked away. She kept reciting it every day." The man's anger dissipated upon hearing this, his eyes clouded with joy, and he urged his servants to deliver him to his room. The steward followed him attentively and said, "I'm afraid the little lady from outside may not be clean. If you wait until the servant orders the female envoy to take her down and tidy up. Let me take a look first to see if it's really like the celestial appearance on the portrait." The man couldn't wait and saw the servant about to put the cloth bag on the ground. He quickly said, "Put it on the couch, be careful not to hurt my beauty." I personally stepped forward to untie the cloth bag, and the more difficult the knot was to untie, the more itchy my heart felt. If beauty was too easy to obtain, it would lose its meaning. It was extremely difficult to untie, only to see that there were originally 2 cloth bags inside. The man first opened one of them, and in the next moment, a smile froze on his face. He exclaimed in surprise and stepped back, "What the hell is this?" Seeing the face of the ugly woman who had been gagged and blinded in one eye, the steward was also startled. He tried to calm his tone and said, "Sir, calm down. This is just an addition. If you don't like it, the little one will be carried out and thrown away. Can this person surnamed Zhou do business? Even if you buy one get one free, this gift is too shabby. Hurry up, throw it out quickly." The man was very angry. As a gesture of compensation, he had someone throw the blind woman out while politely approaching and opening another sack. He smiled apologetically and said, "The immortal in the painting you want is here. Please wait and see." Before the words were finished, the smile froze. The surroundings are suffocating tranquility. The man he called the husband had a pale face, his lips trembling, and he was so angry that he almost lost his breath. Looking at the old man struggling to lift his eyelids in the sack, the steward trembled and said, This must be something amiss. In a cloth bag, such a ghost thing will never come out for no reason. And as soon as it opens, there are 2. In the alley, the girl had untied the rope from the neck of the green donkey and patted it, saying, "Let's go." Seeing her let go of the donkey, the boy followed her and couldn't help but ask, "Why did you bring them here? Why don't you earn money when you have money? The girl asked in reverse, holding her purse. People don't sell me, I don't sell people, that's right. The boy was very uneasy and said, but they will soon find out what's wrong. If we don't come, they will also come knocking on their door. Instead of doing so, it's better to take the initiative to explore the way and distinguish between truth and falsehood. The girl's eyes were thoughtful. About the existence of this employee, the couple did not lie, and it seemed more like they were relying on themselves than daring to lie. This kind of courtyard, with such extravagance, would not be an ordinary person. The boy seemed to understand, but quickly followed the girl and said, "Can we go to the government now? It's even more impossible." Ah! The boy was confused and uneasy. Where are we going then? Here we go. The girl quickened her pace and said, "Run." The boy instinctively followed her and started running before he could fully react. Quickly, there was indeed a faint voice from behind, the steward becoming angry and embarrassed. "Hurry up. We must catch that stinky kid back." Not far from the long alley is the bustling street market. Those people were chasing closely, and the girl and the boy ran through the crowd for a while. Under the cover of the paper kite stall ahead, they dodged and got into a carriage parked on the street. She identified that there was no one in the car and could use it to take shelter for a moment. Through the slightly raised gap in the car curtain, the steward and his men continued to chase forward, and a group of people quickly disappeared into the crowd. The girl silently lowered the car curtain. As she was about to leave, Yu Guang suddenly made her pause and her gaze immediately fell on the coffee table placed in the car. She stared fixedly at the objects on the table, feeling quite surprised. "After tinkering for several days, I finally signed the contract. As is well known, according to the rules of the martial arts world, once you sign a contract, you can vote for a monthly ticket. Some small hints about asking for a monthly pass. What are you going to eat for lunch? Let me refer to it." End of this chapter. Chapter 5. Severe illness. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 5. Severe illness. This carriage looks ordinary on the outside, but inside it lies a hidden mystery. On the coffee table, the white jade and exquisite tea leaves are as smooth as a mirror, crystal clear, and extraordinary at first glance. But this alone is not enough to attract her attention. The girl picked up a teapot lightly, and saw a familiar light blue floral emblem at the bottom. This tea set was one of the wedding gifts she had prepared for a friend earlier. Her good friend married into the Wei family of the Duke of Zheng in the capital at the age of 15, and these congratulatory gifts were all sent to the Duke of Zheng's mansion back then. So, did the Wei family actually come to Hezhou? Who could it be? It doesn't matter who it is, but if you know who the Wei family came here, you can roughly determine the purpose of their trip. The girl's gaze scrutinized the interior furnishings inch by inch, without seeing anything belonging to the girl. She must be a legitimate member of the Wei family if she can freely use the gifts she gave back then. The legitimate lineage of the Wei family was only two families. The former Duke of Zheng passed away early, and the eldest son Wei Qin inherited the position of Duke of Zheng. Her good friend was the Lady of Duke of Zheng. Wei Yu, the second son of the Wei family, was the legitimate younger brother of Duke Zheng's mother and served as the young minister of Dali Temple. Duke of Zheng, Wei Qin, was delighted by the beauty of flowers and brocades, while the interior of the carriage was elegant and concise. This carriage has an ordinary appearance and does not have the Wei family emblem. Obviously, it has no intention of revealing its identity. So could it be the Wei family Erlang who came here wearing a humble robe? If that's the case, this trip will definitely be unusual. The girl thought for a moment and then made a decision. She quickly took out the neatly folded thick sheets of paper from her collar, pressed them under the broken silver that had just been left, and then jumped off the carriage with the boy. At the window on the second floor, a servant frowned slightly and said, "Lang Jun, they have left. Just now, I saw the two young men, one big and one small, sneaking into the Lang Jun's car. He was about to catch and drive them away, but Lang Jun said, "No need," and he stood by the window, holding his arms and watching as if it was nothing to him. Note that the items inside the car are not only valuable, but also contain confidential documents from the court. What should be done in case of any mishap? But as Madam said, the husband has always been seriously ill in his actions. The young man, who was seriously ill, casually let out a and said, "Let's go." Just now, he turned around calmly and went downstairs with his followers. In early spring, the young Lang Junyu wore a crown of black hair, a plum-colored brocade robe, a tall and straight figure, fair skin, and deep eyebrows and eyes. This is like the demeanor of a solitary pine in Yushan, as if it has a sense of isolation from the hustle and bustle of the surrounding market, attracting passers-by to glance sideways. The girl hid in the dark, seeing such a good face, and seeing him indeed get into the carriage, she couldn't help but look thoughtful. Although she had never met Wei Yu, the second son of the Wei family, she had also heard of him, who was as handsome and charming as Panan, and was in his early 20s. But why inexplicably, do you feel so familiar with the eyes? Perhaps she has met Duke Sheng, and there must be some similarities between her legitimate brothers. In this way, it can be concluded that this person is indeed the Erlang of the Wei family. The girl felt relieved and left with the boy. "Lang Jun, is there anything missing?" the attendant asked in a low voice through the car curtain. Although it may have been Lang Jun's fault, if he were to chase after it at this moment, he would still be able to catch up. Over the years, he has cleaned up countless strange mess left behind by his husband who was seriously ill. But I could hear a voice inside the car that seemed to be laughing but not laughing. Not only is there not less, but there are more. The young man had slender fingers and picked up the broken silver. Immediately, he slowly unfolded the paper pressed under the broken silver, lowered his gaze, and sighed. However, taking a moment to give such a generous gift is really too particular. After a moment, the broad palm lifted the car curtain and looked towards the direction where the two youths had left. At noon, the two youths found an inn in the city and asked for 2 upper rooms to stay. The waiter brought in hot water, and the girl took a shower behind the screen of the landscape painting. She walked out of the bathtub and stood barefoot, taking a clean cotton towel to dry the water droplets on her body, and then looked at the body. It looks like she's just reaching her hairpin age. Although she can be considered tall, her limbs and waist are too delicate and weak. Her hands and 10 fingers are also fair and soft, indicating that she is a delicate girl raised in a boudoir. Objectively speaking, it can be seen but not used. But since it was picked up for nothing, it's not her turn to dislike it. And strength, as long as one is willing to endure hardship and persevere, will always be there. The girl took the clean young man's robe that was draped on the screen and bought from the ready-to-wear shop when she arrived. Just as her left arm passed through the snow-white middle garment, her dressing movements suddenly paused. The girl has fair and delicate skin all over her body, and the red mole at her heart is particularly eye-catching. She lowered her eyes to look at the red mole, and an old scene flashed before her. A beggar-like little girl who had just barely learned to walk, plopped into the mud and water, her dirty little face covered in tears. The little girl she called Ollie also has such a red mole in her heart. But Ollie is only 4 years old this year. Putting aside her thoughts, the girl continued to dress, without looking askance. She tied her robe and buttoned it up, her movements skillfully flowing like flowing clouds. She wiped her wet hair with a cotton towel and walked out from behind the screen. At this moment, the door was knocked on and she said, "Sir, the food you ordered has arrived." "In." The girl suppressed her voice. When the waiter came in, he saw the young man wiping his hair with his back to him. His clothes were brand new, his body was thin but his posture was upright and majestic. The waiter didn't take a closer look and only thought to himself, this young man is indeed a wealthy gentleman from a certain family. After arranging the food, he went out. The girl put down the cotton towel for wiping her hair and walked towards the dining table, saying, come in." The boy guarding outside the room only pushed the door in when he heard this. He also washed his face and changed into a clean robe, but obviously the process was rushed, and his hair didn't even have time to tidy up. "What have you been waiting outside for?" the girl asked as she sat down. "I am waiting for the gentleman, you cannot let him wait for me." He temporarily referred to the girl as the gentleman, as agreed upon on the way to the inn. The girl picked up the chopsticks and said, "Let's have dinner first." Should I also eat these together?" The girl looked up and said, "Otherwise, I'll order you another table." "No, no." The boy quickly shook his head and said, I have never sat with anyone to eat. You saved me and took me out of Changjia village. Give me steamed buns to eat, give me new clothes to wear." The boy pointed to the neighboring guest room, his expression extremely grateful, and inexplicably felt guilty. "Let me sleep on that soft bed." What should I do? Otherwise. He racked his brains thinking about what he could do, but couldn't come up with an equivalent reward that would make him accept everything with peace of mind. He kept saying otherwise, non-stop. "Otherwise, I'll break one of your legs," the girl asked expressionlessly, "so you can always feel at ease." The boy widened his eyes, opened his mouth, and stuttered, if the husband really needs. Girl. She doesn't need it that much either. And in the end, the boy couldn't accept having dinner with her at the same table. He took a bowl, picked up some food, and squatted in the corner of the wall to eat after dinner. When the waiter came to tidy up the dishes, he couldn't stay idle and helped the waiter tidy up. After finishing all of this, he stood there with hopeful eyes and hands, as if waiting for her to hand out some tasks. The harder the better. Facing those overly clear eyes, the girl silently averted her gaze. And the boy followed her gaze and saw 2 washed water radishes in a bamboo basket beside her. Having all the necessary items in the upper chamber, it is common to have fewer fruits and vegetables in winter and spring, and to use water radishes as fruits and vegetables to eat raw. The next moment, the girl saw him come forward and took out a cloth bag from her arms. The bag was opened and it was his kitchen knife. In the next moment, the carrot peel flipped over. Quickly, a radish that had been shaved clean and shiny was handed to her. "Lang Jun, here." The girl looked at the kitchen knife in his hand with some surprise. "Such knife craftsmanship, it's a pity that I haven't used it to chop people in these years." She looked at the boy in front of her. "Probably when I was young and unable to resist, I tried to resist. After experiencing all the consequences of resistance failure, when I had strong resistance, I dared not resist anymore." People who do not resist are often driven by fear in their hearts. Once, under that arrangement, she did not resist either. It's not about fear, it's about paying off debts. She repaid the debt of kinship with her flesh and blood. From now on, no one can threaten her under any pretext. She only does what she wants to do and only takes the path she wants to take. For example, she doesn't really want to eat this carrot. Too spicy, I don't like it. You can eat it yourself. The girl stood up and walked towards the bed. "I want to rest. If you're not tired, pay more attention to the news outside." The boy finally waited for her to speak up and nodded eagerly, then went out to close the door for her. The girl lay down on the bed and pulled on the blanket. She chose to settle here and requested to go into the room. Apart from sleeping comfortably, she also had other considerations. There will be many people looking for them outside, whether it's from Lyoka Lane, Changjia village, or behind Changjia village. But if she continues to stir things up, it will only be a small trouble in the eyes of those behind her, and it is not worth making a big fuss at all costs or even causing unnecessary complications. Therefore, at most, she can only secretly investigate the whereabouts of the 2 of them. Those people would not expect that the people who should have been hiding from the east would live in the inn and go to the room in a dignified way. But under the guidance of her generous actions and words, the waiter here is very willing to regard her as going out with the family in spite of anger, hoping to hide a quiet rich man outside. If anyone comes here to explore, he will block her back. This method can only be avoided for a while, not for a long time. But those people probably didn't have much chance for her to hide for too long. She had planned to take advantage of the chaos and sneak out of the city today, going to the neighboring Fuzhou, and secretly trying to deliver the evidence and clues in her hand to an old friend. Her old friend was an upright official, and if she knew about the chaos in Hezhou, she would not stand idly by. I just didn't expect to stumble upon the Wei family gentleman who came here in a humble attire today, which saved me a lot of trouble. The matter with the Zhou family village should be resolved as soon as possible. For now, she only needs to wait for news at this inn and get a good sleep. Close your eyes and you will fall into darkness. After an unknown amount of time, a cold white light emerged from the darkness, and the light gradually grew stronger. The white eyes were blazing, like an endless snowfield. In the snow, the woman's green hair scattered like a waterfall, and a cold knife cut across her neck. The blood spread and soaked in the snow. As her eyes were completely engulfed in crimson, the girl suddenly opened her eyes. The sky was getting dark at some point, and she raised her hand in the darkness, subconsciously probing her slightly cold neck and trying to turn her head and move around. Well, the neck is still there. The girl then closed her eyes again. At the same moment, someone also turned their neck. The young man who had finished his official duties stood up from the desk, closed his eyes, and raised a large hand to rub his temples. Lang Jun, there is a secret letter from the capital. He knocked on the door and presented 2 letters. The young man casually opened one of them, and the letter inside was neatly folded. When opened, there was no handwriting on it, but a portrait of a young girl. Good afternoon, thank you all for your recommended and monthly tickets. Thank you to Mo Shiwuxia, Bright Moon Wujian, Cold-Eyed World 520, Book Friends 201904161726487770, A4318, Spring Flowers and Autumn Moon 85, as well as QQ Readings Book Friends for their tips. The list ID over there cannot be copied, but we have all seen and received them. Thank you all. Also, could you please leave a comment for QQ Reading Friends and click on the 5 stars, love you all. In addition, I would like to recommend my friend Bao Bao Z's new book Endless Pregnant Mothers Survive with Unlimited Resources, and the post-apocalyptic hoarding article. For those who are interested, you can go and take a look, and this despicable woman actually has saved manuscripts. End of this chapter. Chapter 6. Don't break your mouth. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 6. Don't break your mouth. The young man let out a soft, hey. Changjia, do you think the little girl in this painting looks familiar to you? Upon hearing the words, Changjia shook his head and said, I have no impression. I couldn't help but say, Madam, which girl has you been looking for your husband again? The husband is the only son in the family, but in his 20s, he refuses to discuss marriage for a long time. His wife is very concerned about this. Whenever she hears that a new wife has been married in a certain family, she may feel restless, but in severe cases, she may suffer from a heart-wrenching illness for 3 days. It may not be Auntie. The young man opened another letter and his eyebrows moved slightly. Yu Zheng. Changjia was extremely surprised and said, how could this person pass on the message to my husband? Yu Zheng was the head of the eunuchs in the court, in charge of the palace and the platform, highly trusted by the sages. Ordinary officials would call him Yu Gong when they saw him. But he is arrogant and self-reliant, known for his lack of personal connections. He never gives people a good face on weekdays, as if everyone has dug up his ancestral tomb and owes him 1.8 million taels of silver. Unexpectedly, Duke Yu also entrusted me with a day to find someone. The young man's gaze returned to the portrait and said thoughtfully, it was the girl from General Chang's mansion who got lost. General Chang. Changjia became confused and said, "The girl from General Chang's mansion has been lost. Why is Yu Changsha in such a hurry? And since she has many ears and eyes, she doesn't lack the means to find someone, why would she entrust it to the husband?" "Because there are many ears and eyes," the young man looked at the letter and said, "Yu Xing knew that I had come to Hezhou under the secret order of the sage, and he had also found out that most of the girls from the Chang family were in the Hezhou area. Now that I am on a mission here, if he makes too many moves to find someone, he may have the suspicion of obstructing the sage's will. As for why the girl from General Chang's mansion was lost, Yu Changsha, who has always been alone, secretly followed suit. Perhaps related to past events. A long time ago, General Chang and Yu Chang were both loyal to the same person." Thinking about this, the young man had a brief daze in his eyes. Does that gentleman want to help with this? Why not help? The young man regained his senses and sighed, this is a rare opportunity for Duke Yu to owe him a favor. But Mr. Lang doesn't have much to ask him for. This statement is a big mistake. The young man sat back in his chair and said, "There's no need to talk about picking up things that were picked up for nothing on the road. You have to pick them up first. If you don't pick them up, someone else will come to pick them up. As someone like me, I always don't want to see anyone else picking up cheap things. If I see someone else picking up cheap things for nothing, I feel like I can't sleep soundly." Changjia. Lang Jun's half-true and half-false remarks about illness are always endless. The incident of the Chang family girl getting lost is either in Hezhou or related to the current investigation. The young man pushed the picture on the desk and explained, "Once the matter in the Zhou family village has been confirmed, you can investigate it immediately. Follow me personally and use this picture to check if there are people who match their age and appearance." "Yes." Changjia responded, and as the portrait was about to recede, the person behind the desk called out to him, "Wait a minute. What else does the gentleman have to say? The news of a lost girl should not be publicized. If you are looking for someone, then find them. Don't break your mouth." Changji's cheeks trembled. Changjia is the top-notch guard of the Duke of Zheng's mansion, with extremely strong professional skills. His face is cold and his heart is cold, and his knife in his hand is even colder. How could he be that person with a broken mouth? Your words are not very hurtful, but extremely insulting. The young man left with a conscious sense of grievance, and as the door to the study was closed, his gaze fell on the thick papers with blood marks that were pressed down by the paperweight. Immediately, he didn't know what was on his mind and raised his eyebrows slightly, as if lost in thought. At this moment, it is not peaceful in Zhoujia village. Li Zheng had just returned home cursing, with half of his face still swollen and red. He went into the city today with money to meet the steward of the noble mansion. Just as he spoke a few words, a chubby man in brocade walked in. The steward said that he was the young master of the mansion. As soon as he was about to bow, he was kicked in the heart by the young master, slapped in the face, and cursed at him. He didn't know why, but he also apologized repeatedly. It's unclear when he offended this gentleman. I was inexplicably beaten and couldn't help but mutter to myself. On the way back, I carefully recalled the words that the gentleman had scolded him, and a guess couldn't help but arise in my heart. The outsider in Liuka Lane has never shown his true face, is it? And it is said that the good product that old Xuan lost was originally intended to be sent to Liuka Lane, and now that the old couple are gone, the goods have also escaped. He went to the mansion of the nobleman to explain this matter, but before he could finish speaking, he was scolded and beaten by the gentleman of the mansion. Thinking about these, Li was sitting on the bench, and a guess came to his mind. At this moment, the lame woman came in with a basin of water, held it in front of him, and whispered, "Clean your hands, the food is ready. Get lost. What's bothering you by coming over at this time?" The restless man lifted his hand and flipped the basin over, pouring hot water all over the woman. The woman crouched down with a numb expression and wiped the water off the floor with a cloth. "You didn't hear me, did you? The man kicked over, as if to vent all the treatment he had suffered in the city today on the skinny woman in front of him. The woman gritted her teeth and endured his punches and kicks. Don't hit auntie anymore. A 6 or 7-year-old girl cried and rushed over to hug the woman. You didn't find it easy for me, did you? The man became even angrier and grabbed the little girl as he walked towards the outside of the hall. It seems that my memory last time wasn't enough. I must kill you today, this loser. The little girl cried and struggled. The woman saw no hope in pleading, and her heart was filled with fear. She grabbed the wooden stool at hand, climbed up, chased after it, and threw it at the man. The man's face suddenly became extremely gloomy. He left the little girl and grabbed the shovel by the door. The woman with water dripping on her body came to her senses, her pale face turned pale, and she took a few steps back. On the night of early spring, it was so cold that people trembled. Dad, something's wrong. A 13 or 14-year-old boy ran back from outside and didn't look at the women and girls. He gasped and said, there are many people out there dressed like officials. Official. The man with the shovel frowned, but he was not flustered. I'll go and have a look. Mother, why are you making Dad angry again? The young man complained to the woman and ran out with her. The trembling woman approached her daughter and comforted her in a low voice, don't be afraid, Nyo. However, tears couldn't stop falling down. After so many years, she has become indifferent, but her daughter. Not to mention whether she can endure the day of growing up safely, even if she grows up, what will be waiting for Nyo. My biological daughter can also be exchanged for silver, which is not without precedent in this magical village. The sound outside became chaotic and noisy, with flames illuminating the night. The woman held her daughter tightly and instinctively looked up towards the outside of the courtyard, and the flames also reflected in her dull eyes. Female lead. 6 chapters have passed, and I don't have a name yet. What is the system author? Next chapter definitely. Oh, I just realized that the only person with a name on the stage now is Jin Sui Changji, which is a bit outrageous. But then, everyone didn't think anything was wrong, did they? End of this chapter. Chapter 7. Unable to escape a madness. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 7. Unable to escape a madness. The burning torches lit up the entire Changjia village like daylight. Li Zheng, where did these officials come from? A villager asked urgently. Looking at the officers and soldiers who had surrounded the entire village, Li Zheng's face also became flustered. It doesn't seem like they are our officials in Hezhou. He had never seen the attire of those officers and soldiers before, only feeling that their bodies were cold and inviolable. Every household search cannot be left behind. Quickly, the situation plunged into unprecedented chaos. Dogs barking, crying, begging for mercy, pointing out, cursing, all mixed together. The woman holding her daughter and peeking behind the courtyard door opened her eyes wide, gazing at the flames as if she had caught a glimpse of dawn. At the dawn, the families of the governor's office in Hezhou City were awakened from their sleep. What are you shouting so early in the morning, crying and mourning? The fat man stood up and sat on the couch, cursing. Lang Jun, things are not going well. The man glared at the talking servant and said, what big deal can happen? This is Hezhou. His father is the governor of Hezhou. The servant trembled and said, Beijing. It's from Beijing. The man frowned and stood up in his cloak, saying, what about people from Beijing? My father is not alone in Beijing. Zhao Fu, the governor of Hezhou, is walking quickly towards the front courtyard. He didn't know that an imperial envoy had come to Hezhou. And quietly, he was found through the transactions in Changjia village, and before dawn, people surrounded his mansion. If everything else was okay, he wouldn't be completely unaware, but the other party started from Changjia village and didn't leave him any room for reaction. Master, there's no need to panic. If you bite and don't recognize me, it's okay. whispered the staff member as they walked. I have a clear idea, but I still need to send a message to the capital as soon as possible. Zhao Fu forced himself to calm down. I have been in contact with him for many years and have been on the same ship. He will never be saved in the face of death. As he spoke, he suddenly asked, by the way, do you know who that imperial envoy is? This is not clear yet, to the extent that there has been no news of it being concealed. During the conversation, we arrived at the front yard. Outside the mansion gate, 2 teams of guards with swords around their waists quickly entered, and a tall figure walked between the 2 teams of soldiers. The young man wore a wide-sleeved cloak and walked confidently with his hands down. His deep eyebrows and eyes seemed to be tinged with the chill of early morning spring, but his tone was casual and leisurely. Long time no see, Governor Zhao. At the moment when he saw the other person's face clearly, Zhao Fu paused under his feet, his blood color faded, and his lips moved a few times. Wei. Surprisingly, this person came. The incident at the governor's office quickly caused a sensation. In the early morning, shortly after the inn opened, many people gathered in the hall, talking and looking surprised. After getting up early to wash up, the girl who had been practicing morning exercises in the room for half an hour pushed open the door and walked out. Lang Jun. You're up. Standing in front of the fence, he looked up at the boy in the hall downstairs and heard the sound of the door opening. He turned around and said in a surprised tone, they're talking about Changjia village and the governor's office. The girl came to the fence and lowered her eyes to look at the lobby. That Zhou's village is full of flower photographers. I heard there were around 10 of them rescued last night alone. And also dug up many unnamed bones. Fortunately, the court has sent imperial envoys here, otherwise I don't know how many. Wait, why didn't I understand? What is the connection between what you said about the Changjia village incident and the investigation and questioning of the governor's office? Is it difficult? Why do you say that? The people of Changjia village are notorious for their crimes, but they have never been exposed, so they have been secretly sheltered by the governor's office. The governor of Zhao. As a parent official, how could he do such a despicable act? Someone angrily patted the table. This Governor Zhao not only profited from it, but also his son Zhao Dingxuan did not know how many virtuous women he had harmed, and his methods were cruel. He had a separate courtyard in the city, just in Liuka Lane across the street. There were many criminal evidence in it. The father and son of the Zhao family are really inferior to beasts. This is truly the great shame of Hezhou. The girl leaned against the fence and listened, feeling at ease. As she listened to the praise of the imperial envoy from the people in the hall, she also nodded. She thought she would have to wait for at least 3 to 5 days. I didn't expect her to wake up this night, but in just one short night, Wei Jiar Lang cleared everything up. This second son of the Wei family can be used. She praised in her heart, and everyone in the hall became increasingly curious about this swift and decisive imperial envoy. They gathered around a somewhat knowledgeable scholar to inquire. The scholar's tone was filled with longing and admiration. Speaking of which, this Wei official is truly incomparable. He came from the prestigious Sheng State Mansion in the capital, but his entry into the court did not rely on the influence of his family. At the age of 17, he was already the top scorer appointed by the sage's imperial pen. He is the youngest top scorer since he passed the imperial examination. The girl who was planning to return to the guest room paused in the background and frowned slightly in confusion. How did she know about this? Not to mention Wei Yu, when did Dashing have a 17-year-old top scorer? Her first reaction was that the scholar was exaggerating and sensationalizing. The exclamation in the hall continues, now, at the age of just over 20, I have entered the lower provinces and become an official attendant of the eastern Taiwan. Such natural talent and fortune are beyond our reach. The girl's eyebrows furrowed deeper. Why don't you even match your official position? Someone suddenly heard this and said, I've heard of it before. It turns out that this time, it's the only son of the rumored Duke of Zheng. Wei Shui, Wei Shilang. Exactly. The girl suddenly turned around upon hearing the words. That imperial envoy, she stared closely at the waiter who was delivering food upstairs. Wei, what? Why? The guy reacted for a moment and suddenly smiled, let's eliminate harm for the people. The young girl tentatively asked. Is the imperial envoy from the capital called Wei Yu, or is it? This is really important to her, Wei Yu. You're talking about the second master of the Wei family. With such a family background, any person who comes out is a significant figure. Moreover, the capital is only 1,000 miles away from Hezhou, and the staff are well known for welcoming and sending guests in the inn. At this moment, they smiled and said, you didn't hear what the guests downstairs said. This time, it's not the second master of the Wei family, but his own nephew, Crown Prince of Jing State, and the attendant of Dong Tai, Wei Shi. After the guy finished speaking, he hurriedly left, leaving the girl in place like petrification. After a while, she stiffly lifted her hand and carefully compared the height of the fence in front of her. Wei Shi. That little brat who, relying on his natural talent, has been indiscriminately hostile since the age of 3 or 2. Now her hands lifted higher and higher until they were above her head, as if the young man who had come out of the tea house yesterday was standing in front of her. Now. Has it suddenly become so big? Under the tremendous impact, the girl's face became increasingly expressionless. She slowly turned around and walked towards the room. She needs to be quiet. She needs to stroke it. If not, if this situation continues to develop, her mind will not be able to control it, and she may not be able to escape going crazy. Seeing the girl return to the room and close the door, the boy looked confused but didn't dare to come forward and disturb. Inside the room, the girl sat in front of the mirror, staring steadily at her face in the mirror. If Wei Shi had grown up and passed his 20s, then she raised her hand and lightly pressed on the spot where the red mole was located in her heart, so, Ali should be at this age in the mirror. The girl in the mirror raised her eyebrows and eyes. The child who was once saved by her was unexpectedly abducted in such a wonderful year. Her emotions surged like waves caused by a hurricane, and she closed her eyes. Many complex images flashed through her mind. She only knew that she was lucky enough to be reborn from death, and this world was still that world, but she never thought that today is no longer yesterday, and yesterday has become an old thing. At this moment, a group of people dressed in dark blue attire entered the inn and quickly walked up to the second floor. Today, at least our female lead has a nickname to use. End of this chapter. Chapter 8. Changjia Suining. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 8. Changjia Suining. The group stopped in front of a guest room and the leader spoke. May I ask if Mrs. Chang is here? I don't recognize it, the boy guarding outside the guest room immediately replied. Changjia, the leader, glanced at him and recognized him as one of the young men who had slipped into his own husband's carriage that day. At this moment, he showed the token in his hand. The boy looked at the object in his hand, his eyes puzzled. What was it? What does it mean? Changjia couldn't help but feel frustrated and explained, my husband is the Wei attendant of our sect. We have come to invite Mrs. Chang on behalf of him. Seeing that the boy had no intention of making way, Changjia frowned as someone opened the door to the guest room in front of him. A teenager appeared in sight. Changjia recognized another young man who had slipped into the carriage yesterday and asked sternly, may I ask where Mrs. Chang is? Girl. Is it possible that it's right in front of him? Seeing that the young man was silent, Changjia tried his best to be patient and said, please inform us truthfully, there will be a heavy thank you. The girl looked at him and said, maybe I am. Changji's eyes widened in amazement. This sound, is she actually a lady? He couldn't tell it. The gentleman only said that if he found the person who slipped into the carriage that day, he would be able to find Mrs. Chang, but he never told him that Mrs. Chang was one of the young men. How could a lady from a brothel in the capital dress up like a man? At this moment, I only heard the young lady from the Chang family ask, "I wonder why Wei Shilang is seeking help." Changjia calmed his mood and bowed, saying, "My husband wants to invite Mrs. Chang to move to another courtyard for temporary residence to ensure her safety. After finishing her work in Hezhou, she can leave in a few days. At that time, we will surely send Mrs. Chang back home safely." The girl nodded, then lifted her foot and walked downstairs. The way she walked so quickly made Changjia react for a moment before quickly leading someone to follow. "Lang Jun, I'm really sorry." The waiter who had been paying attention downstairs walked up, apologetically apologizing. If it were someone else, he would dare to stop them, but these people were actually under the command of Wei Shilang in the capital. He was afraid that the young man upstairs might be involved in the current case in the city, so he truthfully informed them. Fortunately, judging from this posture, both sides are friends rather than enemies. The girl said in a low voice, "No problem," and walked out of the inn. The voices were noisy, and a few willow trees on the street had just sprouted their tender branches. The sunlight was as bright as gold. The girl raised her head and looked at the blue and clear sky. Back then, in addition to the nickname Ali, she also named the female doll Suining. It's just that there's always a constant debate about whose surname to follow. At present, it seems that it has followed the surname of Silly de Chang. Always be peaceful. Years of peace and tranquility are also meaningful. However, she did not see with her own eyes how Suining grew up, and the sky did not meet people's wishes, and Suining disappeared in this spring day. But by chance, from then on, she became Chang Suining. Chang Nyangzi. Changjia followed and gestured for the prepared carriage on the side. Chang Suining nodded and bent over onto the carriage. The boy, holding a hastily packed bag in his arms, followed the driver and sat on the pedestal. The wheels rolled, and I would always lift a corner of the car curtain inside and look at the situation on the street. The governor's mansion was suddenly raided by the imperial envoy, but the people in the city were shocked and not in chaos. There was no chaos on the streets, indicating that Wei Shi was not only swift in handling affairs, but also reliable and meticulous, covering all aspects. And surprisingly, I found her so quickly. This is not like his father Wei Qin, nor his mother Duan. Thinking of my old friend and looking at this homeland, Chang Suining's gaze seemed somewhat distant. "Are you going back to the capital?" "There is no doubt about nature. That is her home, there are her old friends, and there are also old stories that she has been unable to let go of. In addition, she needs to know what the inside story is about Ali falling into the water on the night of the Changyuan festival in the capital before being abducted. She cannot let Ali walk inexplicably." The carriage stopped in front of a courtyard in the city. Wei Shi came here in a humble robe, so he temporarily resides in another courtyard here. "Madam Chang, please stay here with peace of mind. If you need anything, just give orders to the servants. Besides, my lord has said that there will be no news of Mrs. Chang's appearance in Hezhou. Please rest assured about this." Explanation of Changjia one by one. "Thank you very much." Chang Suining stopped in front of the small courtyard where he was placed and asked Changjia, "I just don't know why Lord Wei knew I was here and why did he help me?" Upon hearing this, Changjia felt inexplicably wary and quickly explained, "My lord was entrusted by the Imperial Palace and the Imperial Palace to pay attention to the whereabouts of Lady Chang in Hezhou City." Thinking of the young ladies in the capital who had various ways to get close to their own husbands, he immediately said, "My lord is busy with city affairs and is not here at this moment. And since he is entrusted by someone, there is no need to express gratitude." But the young girl was slightly taken aback, and her focus was not on her husband. "You Changsha of the Imperial Palace. You Zheng." Changji's eyebrows twitched. How dare this little lady call that you Changshi's surname directly to others? But seeing her waiting for her answer, she nodded and said, exactly. Always feel a little surprised. Ah Zhang has now achieved great success and has become a regular attendant, in charge of managing the palace. She wanted to ask who was sitting on the dashing dragon chair now, but she didn't want to be treated as a fool by the seemingly unintelligent Wei family in front of her, so she didn't rush to inquire. Seeing that she didn't ask much else, Changjia secretly relaxed a little and bowed before leaving. The servant in the courtyard who was ordered to take care of Suining was very thoughtful. In the afternoon, a tailor will come to measure and make clothes for the lady. I wonder what color and pattern the lady usually likes. No need to trouble, Suining said, when going out, men's clothing is more convenient. The servant was somewhat surprised, but did not interfere much. She only came down and asked, is there anything that the lady needs to pay extra attention to when drinking and living in her daily life? That's the point. Suining said seriously, eat more meat in each meal and don't be too greasy. Eating more meat is the key to strength. It is a dietary habit that has been ingrained in her bones for many years. The servant nodded with a smile and retreated to arrange. The matter with Changjia village has been resolved, and I need to go back to the capital. Suining took out a money bag and placed it on the table. The boy standing beside him said, take these silver coins. The boy reacted for a while and understood her meaning, but with a thump he knelt down towards her, somewhat incoherent. I have no parents, nowhere to go. Although I only know how to cook, I will learn whatever my husband asks me to learn in the future. I will do any work, just beg him not to drive me away. Looking at the young boy who seemed to see her as a life-saving straw, Suining asked, do you want to stay with me for a long time? Yes. It was my husband who saved me, and I. Suining interrupted his excited voice and said straightforwardly, but I don't have enough silver at the moment. I can give you monthly money. Although I have understood my current identity, many things are difficult to promise when I first arrive. But the boy was surprised and said, your husband has kindly given me a job, why do you still give me silver? Suining. I'm afraid this is not testing her moral bottom line. Facing the boy's overly clear eyes, she remained silent for a moment before saying, don't go out and say these words. Otherwise, it's inevitable to be caught as a donkey and dragged away for a lifetime. The boy nodded, half knowing and half understanding. All right, get up. After lunch, come with me and go out. Suining said. The boy was overjoyed and quickly responded. In the afternoon, Suining left the other courtyard and sat down in a lively tea house on the street. Hurry up. With a loud shout, the sound of hooves could be heard, and a group of people and horses galloped through the street, evading the crowd. Sitting by the window, Suining looked at the rapidly disappearing troops and the military flag, feeling a bit stunned. He instinctively said, is that the Xuanci army? Does Lang Jun also know about Xuanci Jun? Asked the waiter who was serving her tea. Suining nodded lightly and said, I know. Not just knowing. Good evening everyone, tomorrow should still be noon for timely updates. Thank you all for your monthly and recommended tickets. Thank you to book friends such as Mingyue Wujian, book friend 1605242353155860, Klyros, I only read books without leaving a message, and Cold-Eyed World 520 for their tips. End of this chapter. Chapter 9. Governor Chui Dadu. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 9. Governor Chui Dadu. To say, the Xuanci army founded by His Royal Highness the Crown Prince is truly the first divine weapon of our great prosperity. Speaking of this, the colleague was quite enthusiastic, but couldn't help but sigh with regret. When His Highness the Crown Prince was still a prince, he was only 11 or 12 years old. He entered the battlefield and honed himself with the army, fearless of life and death, and willing to sacrifice himself. It was only a pity. The tea soup enters the bowl and makes a pleasant sound, with hot steam lingering. Suining looked at the hazy tea mist and said, more than 10 years ago, when we fought against Beatty, it seemed like we were also part of the Schwanza army. I wonder what the results were. More than 10 years ago. The guy recalled that he was still very young and didn't remember anything at that time, but upon hearing about it, he answered fluently. Your Highness, did you mean the crucial battle 12 years ago, commanded by General Chang? It was a great victory. That battle made the originally arrogant Beatty kneel and beg for mercy, and the interior was torn apart, so he lived in peace for many years. Suining slightly curved the corner of her mouth. A great victory, that's great, it's worth it. Speaking of the crucial battle, in addition to the bravery of Xianzijuan, it was also thanks to our dashing Chow's courageous Princess Royal Highness Princess. The waiter sighed. Waiter, add water. A guest urged loudly. Here we go. The waiter quickly left holding the tea tray, while Suining sat there, lifting his hand to pick up the tea bowl. She probably knows better than anyone about the things that the guy didn't finish speaking in time. It turned out that it had been 12 years in just a blink of an eye. She looked out the window again at the long street. Just now, the Schwanza army appeared to be scouts clearing the way and reporting messages, and the red satin tied to the military flag was a symbol of great victory. This is a victory, we need to return to the court with our troops. Passing through Hezhou and passing through Shannon West Road, it was mostly a war in the south. The southern region has never been stable, with constant battles of all sizes. But winning a battle is always a happy thing. Suining looked up to drink tea and looked out the window at the bustling long street, his eyes gradually becoming curious. How could she not be curious? 12 years of time is enough for too many unexpected new things to happen to her. For example, what she is most curious about right now is, I don't know who the general in charge of the Schwanza army is now. She asked for 2 dishes of dim sum. When the waiter sent them, she took the opportunity to ask. Of course, it's Cui Jing and Cui Dadu. Facing the look in his buddy's eyes that said, how could you not even know this? Suining understood clearly. It seems that Cui Jing is quite famous and prestigious. But, Cui Jing Suining recited the name from the bottom of her heart, feeling as if she had heard it somewhere, but had no impression. But since he is surnamed Cui, how could he easily become a warrior? I couldn't help but ask, how old is Governor Cui now? The buddy replied, it's only 20, but he's still young. Moreover, Cui Dadu comes from the Cui family in Qinghe and is unparalleled in fame. He is also the eldest grandson of the legitimate lineage of the Long family. Suining even found it strange. 22 years old. When she died, Cui Jing was only 10 years old. She rarely stays in Beijing and has never heard of this person, which is normal. However, the Cui family in Qinghe is the leader of the aristocratic family in the world, and they are the most proud. Although there are many officials holding important positions in the family, they must serve as important civil servants in the Qin dynasty. Cui Ju, who once gave the position of prime minister to the Cui family, disdains it. Now, how could his legitimate grandson Kongwu sell his life for the court? Can't it be that in just 12 years, the Cui family hasn't fallen to this level? But these noble families, even if they may temporarily decline, they must maintain their own integrity. The matter of Cui Jing leading the Schwanza army seems strange no matter how one thinks about it. In this battle against the southern barbarians, Commander Cui and General Chang led their troops to fight for nearly 2 years, and now they have finally won and returned to court. The assistant said excitedly, the victorious army may pass through Hezhou, and in a few days, they may even be able to see Commander Cui's divine talent. De Chang is also among the army returning to Korea this time. Suining's expression also showed some anticipation. She hasn't seen De Chang for a long time. Not only the 12 years that passed quickly, but also before these 12 years, she had not seen the Chang in them for a long time. The anticipation of meeting her old friend soon allowed her to ask the question she most wanted to know but subconsciously wanted to avoid: who is the current ruler of Dasheng, Your Majesty? As the words fell, I saw a puzzled and shocked expression on the face of the colleague who had just smiled. Being treated as a fool is never surprising. No problem. Anyway, she won't come here tomorrow. Nature is a sacred book. The guy said a year name that Suining had never heard of before. Since I haven't heard of it, it's unlikely that it's Li Bing from 12 years ago. Who is it? Suining asked, Empress Dowager Ming. Of course, the waiter lowered his voice a bit and said, but the sage is just hanging the curtain to represent the government now. After His Highness the Crown Prince can govern, he will. However, such matters were never something he could discuss recklessly, so halfway through, he found an excuse to do the work. Always keep your eyes closed, and the brightness of your eyes is uncertain. Holy Book Emperor. Sure enough. Mingshi, as expected, has become the master of dashing Jiangshan. After finishing a cup of tea, her mood gradually calmed down. The news in the tea house was always clear and complicated, and she listened quietly until it was getting dark before putting down her tea money and leaving. Lang Jun, it's getting late. Are you hungry? The boy followed behind her and said, I just heard them say in the tea house that there is a roasted chicken shop ahead. I won't go, Suining said. There are those who don't want silver. The boy quickly realized. Yes, there are plenty of food and meat in the other courtyard, and he doesn't even accept the girl's money. So. Is that why the girl agreed to stay here temporarily? At this moment, looking at the figure ahead, the boy suddenly realized. Do you have a name? Suining casually asked. The boy thought for a moment, then lowered his head and shook it. There is, but he really doesn't want to mention it. Please give me one, Mr. Lang, he whispered with some hope. Suining turned her head slightly to look at him. In the twilight, the round eyes of a boy aged 11 or 12 were clear and spotless, and his eyelashes were thick and flickering. Suddenly, it reminded her of the boy who was once closest to her and closely connected to her from birth in this world. With a slight drop in my heart, I felt a dull pain, and Suining turned back to look ahead. After a moment, she said, let's call it ache. Oh. I went out. Yes, I had no reason to stop him, so I had someone secretly follow and take care of him. Changjia and Wei Shi, who had just returned from outside, reported in detail. The door that came out after finishing the lunch, came back when it was time for the evening meal, and the timing was well controlled. Wei Shi exclaimed, why does it sound like you're using my other courtyard as a canteen? It's not impossible, Changjia suspected reasonably. The servant said that Lady Chang loves to eat meat, and her appetite is not inferior to that of a man. It is common for ordinary people to eat meat once a month, and for those in need, it is even more necessary to wait until the holidays to have meat. This young lady from the Chang family, who was abducted, must have been greedy for a long time. It is likely that she has taken advantage of the fact that there are many foolish and needy people here. Having figured this out, Changji's mood became somewhat complicated. There are many young ladies who covet your husband, coveting his flesh. See you for the first time. I don't know for a moment whether to feel relieved or something else. Wei Shi closed a stack of official documents and said with a smile, that's great. Before returning to the capital, I'll keep the people more rounded, and when I'm on duty with Duke Yu and General Chang, I'll be able to win more favor. Speaking of which, General Chang and Cui Jing may also have to march to this point. We need to hurry up and feed them more. There's not much time left for me. Changji's mouth twitched. So, is the situation quite urgent? Thinking of Zhao Fu's chubby and big-eared son crying and confessing his grievances today, claiming to have been deceived and played with, Wei Shi asked, did Mrs. Chang mention that she wanted to see me? Speaking of this, Changjia straightened his back and said, I didn't give her a chance to mention this matter. I explained to her that my husband is busy with official business and not in another hospital, and there is no need to thank him. Rest assured, my subordinate has nipped all the troubles in the bud. Wei Shi looked at him with a slight smile and said, you know how to meddle in your own business. Good afternoon, thank you for your monthly and recommended tickets note. This article is fictional about the Tang dynasty, but most of it is fabricated, with a large number of private devices. Do not pay attention to it. The country name dashing is still used in the previous book, there may be some small connections, but they are not significant. End of this chapter. Chapter 10. Outdated waiting. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 10. Outdated waiting. Changjia only felt wronged and said, isn't it that the husband often finds it very troublesome to be entangled by the girl? Wei Shi retorted, do you know that Lady Chang of the Chang family is the most beautiful woman in the capital? Changjia turned around and asked, but isn't the first beauty in the capital a lady? Wei Shi smiled and said, do you also believe it? Changjia. It is clear that the Duke's expression is as firm as a rock when he speaks, making it impossible to doubt. So, is Lang Jun actually a face watcher? The entanglement of the young lady next to her is unbearable. If she were to become the most beautiful woman in the capital, it would be a different story. On the other hand, as your husband grows older and no longer young, how can I fall in the eye of a young lady? Wei Shi stood up from his desk and said earnestly, so, it's better not to overly flatter your husband's face. He's just being laughed at by others, and pretending to be affectionate is not advisable. In the future, his words and actions should be more normal, leaving me some face. Looking at the flawless face of his own husband, Changjia briefly doubted his life. Old age and yellow pearls, Wei Shi. How could he be? Flesh and blood blurred Wei Changjia. Since Empress Chang does not come to see me, I should go and see Empress Chang based on both emotions and reason. Changjia couldn't help but ask, do you want to meet me at this time? Wei Shi looked out the window at the already pitch-black sky and said, then let's start early tomorrow morning. The next morning, Wei Shi went to the small courtyard where Suining was placed. Did you go out again? Changjia widened his eyes. Yes, Madame Chang rested early last night and got up before dawn today. She also ate early in the morning. The servant replied, so she went out early. Wei Shi felt inexplicably amused and nodded, saying, it's great to be able to eat, sleep, and stroll. Let's go, we're going to the government office, he said, turning around with his hands down. Changjia responded with a yes and kept up with his own husband, muttering to himself, the little lady next to me will cry and scare half to death when she encounters such a disaster. I'm afraid she won't even dare to leave the door. It's good that Lady Chang doesn't stay at home at all except for eating and sleeping. Indeed, it's too worry-free. Wei Shi sighed, although I know that Duke Yu's favor was a bargain picked up by Bai, I never expected that Bai would even need to bend his waist when he picked it up so much. As he spoke and walked, he squinted his clear and bright eyes and looked towards the rising sun. The early cold is dispelled, and grass and trees sprout new shoots. A tea house near the Hezhou government office was already very lively in the early morning. The tea guests sat at a table in groups of 3 or 2, mostly discussing matters related to the governor's office and Changjia village. Suining sat by the window on the second floor, seemingly not paying attention to the sounds. With one hand propping up her cheeks and the other playing with a teacup, she looked bored down the long street. Not far from the other side of the street is the Hezhou government office. This morning, she saw many people walking out of the office one after another, many of whom were women or those with disabilities. The people brought by Wei Shi, the imperial envoy, have temporarily taken over the Hezhou government office and collaborated with local officials to handle this case. The night before yesterday, all the people from Changjia village were taken to this place. After a day and night of interrogation, they were determined who were the victims. Afterwards, they were either sent back to their original homes by the government office or resettled separately in Hezhou. Lang Jun, look, that's from Li Changjia. Ake whispered. The lame woman who had just come out of the government office was holding a little girl in her hand. A 13 or 14-year-old boy caught up and without saying a word, went to grab the woman's bag. Bring it to me. What are you doing? The woman avoided the boy's hand and took her daughter 2 steps back. Since it's the placement silver allocated by the Yamen, you should give it to me. The young man glared angrily, Dad is going to be killed by you. What face do you have to live, heartless person? His biological mother actually identified his biological father in the government office. The official asked, and she said that even if the official didn't ask, she would say the same. The boy had to reach out and grab again when suddenly something small hit the back of his head. Who? He turned his head angrily and his eye sockets touched again. The young man let out a painful cry, covered his eyes, and took the other eye to look. He saw a peanut falling to the ground. Who the hell hit me? On the second floor, Suining leaned leisurely against the windowsill and placed the peeled dried jujube meat in his mouth. Ouch! The jujube kernel was sharp and hit the young man's forehead, causing his skin to break and bleed. Fortunately, the person who started the operation now only has a precise head and insufficient strength, otherwise it would not be as simple as breaking the skin. The son of the Li Jing family has also been released. Someone wants to run away, and he has also caught and beaten people. I have seen it with my own eyes. Ake said. Suining patted the debris on her hand and looked at the lame woman. What else can it be? It's just that being a mother has a soft heart, sheltering her son and helping her muddle through vaguely, growing up in that kind of demon cave from a young age, being exposed to it and learning from it, what kind of good thing can it be? But Mr. Liu still chose it himself. The young man suffered several times in a row, but couldn't figure out who hit him. He didn't dare to shout in the air anymore, but instead calmly grabbed the woman and said, "Let's go." You let go of your mother. The girl cried and chased after her, but was kicked hard by the boy and fell to the ground. The woman's face changed completely, her eyes red, and she vigorously pushed the boy away. Are you crazy? Nyo Nyo is your own sister. The sound of discussion and guidance echoed around, and the young man, whose life had suddenly undergone tremendous changes, gritted his teeth and even wanted to punch the woman. Stop it. A group of sword-wielding guards rushed forward, and the young man's face changed. He shrank and withdrew his fists. Changjia led the way and frowned, asking, why is there so much noise here? The Langjun has instructed that it is equally important to maintain the order and stability of the people in the city by assigning tasks to them. Sir, sir. The lame woman recognized him as the person who had surrounded Zhou's village the night before and pointed tearfully at the young man. You can point out that in the case of Zhou's village kidnapping a good citizen, he was also an accomplice. It was always her own. She had thought that if she left Changjia village and separated from that demon cave, everything would be okay. But now it seems that he is no different from his devilish father. Even if it's for Nyo Nyo, she can't be any more soft-hearted. Upon hearing this, Changjia instructed someone to restrain the young man. You! How could you be so vicious and ruthless? The young man looked at the woman incredulously and struggled, let go of me. Changjia. Take it away. No, I didn't. She wronged me. The young man's tone gradually became flustered, eventually turning into showing weakness and begging for mercy. Mom, I was wrong, I know I was wrong. Please explain it to them quickly. The woman closed her tears and stopped looking at him. Watching the young man being dragged away, Suining breathed a sigh of relief. After all, he wasn't too confused. At this moment, in the carriage not far behind Changjia, the curtain of the carriage was lifted by a fair and slender hand. Behind the car curtain, the young man's face was like a green mountain at spring dawn, with clear eyebrows and eyes. The young man raised his eyes and met her gaze. Suining, leaning against the windowsill with her chin, raised her eyebrows slightly and remained calm. Wei Shi's eyebrows moved slightly and he smiled slightly, nodding to her. Suining also slightly lowered his chin, which was considered a response. She dressed up as a young gentleman with such a calm and composed demeanor, as if nothing could make her fluctuate at all. It made Wei Shi laugh silently and put down the car curtain. The carriage quickly left and headed towards the government office. Not long after, Changjia quickly walked up to the second floor and said, "My husband wants to invite Lady Chang to sit here for a while. After he finishes his official duties, she will come here, Lady Chang." Suining remained non-committal and said, "I will stay until noon. After all, when it's noon, she has to go back to another courtyard for dinner." Changjia inexplicably understood the meaning behind her outdated and not waiting and left without a word. A moment before noon, Wei Shi arrived. Accidentally delayed by 2 minutes. Haha. Angle, _ it's time for a difficult choice again. What to eat for lunch? End of this chapter.